Hey, welcome back everyone. It is the start of a new week, a new vlog, and we are sitting outside of a property that we are supposed to be having a closing in just a couple days. So we have a closing in a couple days on this property, and it's actually a great property for this week's discussion, which there's two topics that I want to go over this week. First of those being marketing. I'd like to dive a little bit into just marketing and looking for motivated sellers and looking for those type of leads. And then the other topic that I'd like to cover is going to be the appraisals, because appraisals are a big part of transacting and selling properties in real estate. And what's so important about appraisals is that when you ask for a sales price and you get that contracted sales price, if your property does not appraise, then you might not be selling your property for the contracted price that you thought you were going to get for your property. So what are things that are going to affect appraisals? Well, it's the condition of your property, it's the surrounding area, and it's based on what other properties or comparable properties have sold for typically in the past 6 months. So those are all important factors when you're looking at what the value of a property is. And when we go and when we actually evaluate a property to figure out what we feel that resale price is going to be, we like to comp properties and come up with the values very similar ways to appraisers do, which is we're going to go back, we're going to look at the past 6 months of closed transactions, typically within a 1 mile radius. We're also going to make sure that we have a very similar bedroom and bathroom count, and that our square footage is within 250 plus or minus. Example being, if our house is 1,000 square feet, when I go and I set my search parameters for my sold properties, I'm going to make sure that I put the range at 750 to 1,250 square feet, just so that we have something comparable. And then one of the other things that I think is important when I'm doing my comps is just making sure that I check if it's actually got a pool or not. And what happens is when appraisers are doing those searches, if they can't find similar properties, or let's say within that 1 mile they're not finding anything that's similar, they will start to change some of that criteria. Usually the first thing they might do is pull out the radius and look just within 2 miles, 3 miles, maybe increase the sold period and go back up to a year. But those are the biggest things that they like to look at. So the reason that this is important is because if your property doesn't appraise, again, it means you're going to either have to come up with the difference in that appraised value versus your sale price, or your buyer is. And typically your buyer's not going to want to do that. Usually your buyer is already at, let's just call it the top end of what their purchasing capability is. So they might not have that cash just sitting on the side to come up with the difference, because the bank or the lender is only going to pay for what it appraises at. So if you get a property contracted for $200,000 and your appraiser comes back and says, well, the property's only worth $150,000, all of a sudden you got a big discrepancy there. You have a $50,000 price difference that you have to come up and make a solution with the buyer. A lot of times a buyer's not going to want to come up unless they're truly in love with that property, because they're thinking, well, hey, if the property isn't worth that, why should I be paying that higher price? Usually you're not going to see a difference that big. You might on a higher dollar property, but when we're talking about a $200,000 property like the one behind us, we shouldn't have any issues on the appraisal. Sometimes as the actual selling agent, you might not get to know the exact dollar amount that the appraisal price or the property came in at. Oftentimes you will be able to get the report if it's something where you want to try and fight the value, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later on in the week, which is how you actually go about fighting an appraisal. But the point of this video at this very moment is to show you the property behind me, which is closing in a couple days. The appraiser came out, looked at the property, and came back with a couple requests. And this is an FHA purchase, a Federal Housing Authority purchase. A FHA appraisal will be a little stricter than a conventional mortgage, meaning the appraiser is going to come out, They're gonna make sure there's smoke detectors or fire alarms inside of bedrooms, hallway, certain areas within a house. They're also gonna make sure that they don't see peeling paint or wood rot, things like that. So they have some requirements that if they do detect that when they're out here looking at these homes, they're gonna notate that in their appraisal, and they will give the appraised price, but there will be a couple conditions. And those conditions is gonna be that the items that they've notated in their report that need correcting will need to get corrected prior to closing, and the appraiser will either need to come back out to see those fixes, or they will need evidence and proof of those repairs being completed, such as pictures and receipts. For the house behind me here, the report came back with about a $500 list of items. And I say that because I've never seen this. The appraiser actually notated in his comments what he felt the repairs would cost to handle. And the funny thing is usually the FHA addendums allow up to about $500 in repairs to be made by the seller, although that's all contract and it's an agreement and it's an addendum. So that number could be $0 or it could be whatever you guys agree on. So for this property, that window right there to the left of the front door actually had a crack and it was broken, but the property management company was already in process of getting that repaired because there were tenants in this property. They are now gone, but we also had a little bit of wood rot in the corner of the fascia right there. And then along the side of the house on the gable, and I'll just walk you guys around and quickly show you what I'm talking about. There was some peeling paint right over in this section here. So there was peeling paint there that they said needed to get corrected. There was also a little bit of wood rot towards the side door coming out of the garage on the bottom. Very common to have wood rot towards the bottom of wood areas close to the ground level. Just that's where water can sit. That's where a lot of moisture is. So there was a couple little spots of wood rot on fascia, 2 spots, 2 by this side door in the garage. We had already made sure there was smoke detectors in the house, and they had the broken window. And these were items we had to get corrected. I showed back up this morning, beginning of the week here, because the appraiser comes back out tomorrow morning. And the last thing you want to have happen, especially when you're close to the closing and you're really you're coming down to the wire on having the final inspection for that appraisal get done, and you're trying to get the closing documents and everything in order, is just making sure this appraiser is not going to have to come back out again. That's the last thing they want. It's the last thing we want. So what am I doing as a good agent, as a good seller, is I'm showing up at the property. I'm just checking on the work that was told to me last week was completed. I probably should have gotten out here a little bit sooner, but is what it is. I'm here. I'm still checking 24 hours prior to when the appraiser is going to get here. And unfortunately, I see that one of the sections of the peeling paint that they corrected or attempted to correct didn't fully get done the right way, meaning it doesn't look like the peeled paint got fully sanded down and painted over. It almost looks like whatever guy came out here happened to just paint it, move on. So I got to get my guy back out here to get that corrected so we can get this property sold. But again, this week's vlog, we're going to talk about marketing. We're going to talk about appraisals a little bit more, like how we go about fighting those, and just some of the data in the past couple years that I've gotten out of doing these appraisals myself, not as a certified appraiser, but just as a seller, and my numbers compared to appraisers, and then just some of the other things I've done to fight appraisals and win those, or at least get the pricing adjusted. So we're gonna get on with our day, get to some marketing, because it is Monday, and start working on some new content for you guys for the rest of the week. So till then. All right, what's going on, everyone? We have ourselves a busy day here where we're gonna be hitting up a lot of projects that are closing up, wrapping up, or just getting started. And we are starting today at our Lake Sarasota property. I brought you guys to a few times. We're finally wrapped up inside. Our contractor told us yesterday that he got finished up. I never really got a chance to show you guys the yard, maybe just a little bit of in process, but we are finally wrapped up, and you can see that behind us, and I'll show you a quick shot of that. But that is all wrapped up. We're gonna head inside and just do a quick little walkthrough and show you guys how this one turned out and what we're gonna be doing with it. So let's get in there. I'm gonna let you guys just check this out. Quick little turnaround. Make sure you guys get some good angles, some good shots. Nice open floor plan, family room and living room. Here is the unique island that we had done. That was a choice of the actual contractor. That was his idea. Originally we had talked about maybe removing this wall here to open up the area a little bit more, but it would have made the kitchen slightly weird. You can see we went with a granite countertop. I like the look of this. It's kind of a cross between a level 3 granite and the level 1 Santa Cecilia. But we have our whirlpool appliance package. We've got the nice island, so it really adds to that counter space. Nice entertaining area. You can see just a transition between the flooring that got added to the island and the white cabinets. They did a transition strip that's a little bit of a lighter wood color. I'm not crazy about that. In my opinion, I would end up staining this similar to the floor color. I get that it's merging the two white and light, the light and dark colors, but I'm not a fan of it. I would stain that personally. But overall, everything looks great. It looks like our cabinets got adjusted. We were in here the other day and they needed a little bit of tuning after the counters got put on them. So that's something that's very common. Your heavy countertops get put on your brand new kitchen cabinets, and all of a sudden you'll notice some doors and drawers are all acting funny and closing weird. All right, we'll walk over to our master living area, go through our dining room. So you have the family, living, and dedicated dining room. All right, so this is gonna be our last showing of our property here in Lake Sarasota, and something a little bit different on this. So this was a rehab with the intention of listing this one on the retail market once it got done. But like all properties, you're gonna have things that pop up that change what you're gonna do with the property and what the end goal or game is with all of your real estate. And this is one of those items. So my partner Mark, his daughter, grandkids, and son-in-law have recently moved to the area, and they saw the property while we were doing the work on it, and they decided that this is actually a home that they'd like to make their family home, at least for the next couple of years, because they've been currently renting in the area since moving here. They love the rehab, they love the way it turned out, so we're actually just gonna be turning around and selling it directly to them. So we're already done wrapping up this property, but I'm not gonna get to show you guys the whole process of listing that one, but hey, it's the same situation every time where we list it, field offers, get contracts, go through the processes of getting it sold. Either way, we had a good, successful rehab that turned out great. I'm happy. I'm gonna be happy for my partners, family members, and getting them to enjoy this house and this awesome new pool that their kids will get to use. But either way, this again was a Lake Sarasota property, and we're gonna go back and we're gonna count our vlogs like we talked about. We said it would probably be about 4 or 5 vlogs before this one was wrapped up, and I wanna say we're right at that 5 or 6 mark. So overall, it was a success. The only thing that really changed from our game plan on this property was the roof. It does seem that the roof might need to get replaced as we've reached the end and we're starting to look at insurance. And a buyer usually, if some of those major components like your AC roof are in need of getting replaced anywhere in the next couple years, usually buyers are gonna wanna have that wrapped into their mortgage if possible, so they don't have some big out-of-pocket $5,000, $10,000 expense once they've moved in or a couple years down the road that they're just paying out of pocket. So that's something to consider. It's a way you can help out your buyers. It's a way you can get a little higher sales price on your property, but that's something that's gonna have to get done here most likely. But we're gonna move on and we're gonna keep this conversation going like we had already talked about, where we are going to focus on some appraisals and marketing information. So more of that to come. It's time we talk about some more in-depth discussion on appraisal, and I'm sitting here at our Pine Ranch property, the one that got rehab, the one that had multiple offers within 48 hours, and it just turned out immaculate. I know you guys have seen the walkthrough, you've seen the footage, and this will probably be the last video that we do here. We're closing on this property in 2 weeks with these new homeowners. They're VA buyers. Not that that's a big deal, but the reason I mention that is because FHA and VA loans their appraisals are a little bit different. And when I say they're a little bit different, they're just a little stricter with some of the minimums that they're going to require a house have, such as smoke detectors or the smoke alarms. And that's something I know I just mentioned to you guys, but I just wanted to reiterate some of the things that they look for, because they will they're going to look a little bit harder for these things, such as the wood rot and broken windows, things that they would not want to have a loan put out on a property right away that has these kind of problems or issues. The reason I wanted to bring up the Pine property as an appraisal is because we actually had 3 appraisals get scheduled or taking place this week. We had the rental property, where the appraiser came back and said that we needed to get a couple of these little checklist items knocked out: the broken windows, some wood rot, and some peeling paint that was on the exterior of the house. Peeling paint will always get called out. So we had to get some actual repairs done per an appraiser's request on a property that did appraise, but he said these items have to get knocked out. And then we had 2 other appraisals actually get scheduled for this week. So just a lot of appraisal type activity going on, and I thought it was something worth us talking about. And what I wanted to mention about this property, Pine, and the appraisal was that this is an expensive property. We're talking about a property that's around the $400,000 mark. And with that, obviously, we end up with a higher rehab bill typically on a property that has more square footage, has nicer finishes, and this is a property where that's a perfect example. And what we want to do is, as soon as we get that phone call from the appraiser, being that we're the sellers and the appraiser knows they have to reach out to the selling agent to get access to the property in case there's homeowners there, and just find out if there's any information they should know. Well, something to take note of is every appraiser is different, and their attitudes are different. The way they appraise might be a little bit different, but across the board it's very similar, the way they'll appraise a property. But their opinion is always going to be that's on them. That's their own opinion. So if they look at the finishes of a property, hopefully they compare our finishes very similar to another property, and they don't look at them too differently, and it's something that ends up affecting our appraisal. But the main thing I wanted to mention was this was a little bit of a different interaction with an appraiser that I'm used to. He actually, right out of the gate, as soon as we connected on the phone, of course, he asked how he was going to get access. I was able to give him a lockbox combination because it's a vacant property, let them know they can go whenever they like, making it nice and convenient for them, which appraisers do love that. But here's another tip that I'm going to give. And the nice thing was I didn't have to ask the appraiser for this. He directly asked me, but it's very rare that the appraiser will ask this. He asked if there was an upgrade list that we had of things that were done to this property. And he might have already done a little bit of research and seen that the property sold for a lot less than what we're now about to turn around and sell it for. So he might have already come into this property with that expectation of having to prove his number based on the prior sales price. But regardless, he did already directly ask me for something that I always will provide an appraiser on a rehab property, and that is an expense sheet. And our expense sheet is just a simple Excel sheet that the girl in our office uses when she's tracking all the expenses, where it'll list either the vendor or the project, and then it'll have the amount that was paid to them next to it. So we have a running total. The only thing is you want to make sure that some of those comments, if they're just saying rehab services or something along those lines, that you actually break it down a little bit and tell them, well, these are the items. For instance, on our reports, normally it'll just say rehab, or maybe that contractor or rehabber's name, and then they end up having like 8 different draws that happen throughout the course of the 1-2 month rehab, but there's no real description. And I don't want to provide them the actual estimate or invoice from these people, but I still want to break it down and say, okay, in that bid included doing baseboards and flooring, all new kitchen, all new bathrooms, things like that, just so the appraiser knows. And they're always going to go check the permits in the county website, so they're going to look and see if that roof or the AC or anything is showing active, issued, or closed out in the recent term when they're doing their numbers. But it's still good to make sure that you give them this list and it breaks down the money that went into it. So that is one of my big tips. It's making sure if you're selling a property that was rehabbed, or maybe you're even selling it for another homeowner that did some recent upgrades or has done upgrades over the past 5 years, that's really critical information that you want to provide to the appraiser. It's going to help them justify the value that you're asking for. And you might think that you don't really need to justify the value. You might be telling yourself, there's no way this property won't appraise, but you're gonna be surprised sometimes when you get that appraisal back and it doesn't appraise. And maybe you missed it by $1,000, maybe you missed it by $50,000. You just never know. We have appraisals all the time that just have different results, and you sometimes sit there and you scratch your head. But we're also in uncertain times right now where we've had a pandemic. We know there's going to be foreclosures coming up down the road. So appraisers might be a little cautious along with the lender on the values they're giving properties. So they're probably being a little stricter right now, and anything that you can do to help out justifying the value that you're asking and you're selling for is going to help you out. So one other thing I want to mention. So you go and you provide them a breakdown of expenses on the property. I like to just convert it to a PDF file and send it to them. And then there's one other thing that I will send to them. And usually that is going to be a list of the comparable properties that I felt were good comparables. This can be difficult if you don't have many within your mile radius, because when you do have your set criteria and you set it the same way an appraiser looks and there's not a lot of properties, that's the point at which you don't know what the appraiser is going to do to come up with the values. And we recently had that happen on one of our multifamily properties that was really, really hard to comp. There was no similar sold multifamilies within a couple miles, let alone single families that you could really compare to this house. So it was a really tough appraisal, and it came in $20,000 less than what we needed. Luckily, we were working with a hard money lender that was able to just make a few little changes with some of the numbers to make things work in our favor. And there's, of course, being a hard money lender. But there are struggles that you can come across when you're getting an appraisal. So if you provide them your own comparables, it's just a good starting point for that appraiser to review your comparables, see if they're matching up with the ones they end up finding, or if they have not even searched for the comparables yet and they've got a list of yours. If they end up with a list of maybe 20 properties that they could be cherry picking to choose from, wouldn't it be nice if they saw that you've actually helped them out, you've done some of the legwork yourself, and you feel these are good properties? They might take that a little bit more into consideration, so it's worth giving to them. If you don't have great comps, maybe don't provide that to them, but again, get them that expense sheet, especially on those rehab properties, so you can get your properties to appraise. And then that leads me into that third and final appraisal that I wanted to talk about that's going on this week, and something that happened with that one. So this appraisal is happening at a property where somebody's actually in the process of moving in there. They're going to be doing a lease option purchase basically from us until the closing can happen. So they were moving in there, and I don't have my lockbox on the door with a key in it at this moment because we finally gave him the key. The appraiser called, scheduled it for this Wednesday. The appraiser showed up, and we had already notified the tenant. He was aware that he was coming. He was gonna put a key in the lockbox or be there. The appraiser shows up and he can't get in. So that's already starting out on a bad foot, meaning the appraiser's calling me, wondering why he can't get into the property, and now he's got to reschedule that. So there already could be a little bad taste in his mouth from showing up and not being able to get into a property. So anything you can do to work with these appraisers, to answer questions for them, you're gonna want to make sure you do, because at the end of the day, it is very critical, because when you don't appraise, that has to get worked out between the seller and the buyer, and it can be a tough situation. Because why, as a buyer, if you're standing in the buyer's shoes, why would you feel, besides the emotion that you've already put into this purchase, what reasons can you justify coming out of pocket a couple $1,000 to meet the value and be able to buy this property when the lender is not going to come up with the money? So you as the seller have to either contribute the money, lower your sales price, or you got to renegotiate with your buyer and see if you guys can't meet somewhere in the middle, maybe take some commissions from the agents. Sorry, agents, I know you don't want to hear that, but there's different things you can do to work that out and get a solution. One more thing that I forgot to mention. On the Pine property, the one here in Osprey that we're sitting in right now, the appraiser actually reached out to me after I sent him the expense sheet to ask me one other question. He wanted to know why the contracted price on the property was higher than the list price. And that was something I didn't even think about when I was sending him this information, to just go ahead and explain. And we've had this happen a few times where that's been the situation. And the justification on that, or what I was able to explain to him, was the amount of interest and activity that this property had in the first 48 hours. I was able to tell him and show him, hey, look, we had 13 showing requests over 24 hours. We had 3 offers in hand within 24 hours. We had 2 verbal offers within the 48 hours for a total of 5 offers on this property. So there was a frenzy of interest in this property, and that was something that I wanted to make sure the appraiser understood, that this is a very competitive neighborhood right here. And if he goes and he looks at the comps, he's gonna see many of the comparables to this property did not have the extensive work and new finishes done to it as the subject property, which is the property getting appraised. I hope that was some good information for you guys on the appraisals. If you guys have any other questions about appraisals, feel free to ask me. I don't have a lot of experience contesting appraisals, meaning where you actually will fight the appraisal if the value doesn't come in. I've done that 3 times now. The first time I fought an appraisal, I got them to agree with me, and they came up to the purchase price or the sales price that we had set with the seller. So that was a great first experience. The second time that I fought an appraisal, they ended up meeting me halfway, and this was actually for a bird property, a property where you buy it, you rehab it, you rent it, and you refinance it, and then you repeat the process. That's the final R in BRRRR. But anyways, BRRRR strategy, what's very crucial is that you get your appraised price, because you're trying to get all your money back out, or most of your money back out of a property. So that really changed the numbers, but I was able to get the appraiser to meet me halfway. So another situation where it was positive. It wasn't just a flat out no, we don't agree with you. And then we had this last appraisal, the one where I told you it came in 20,000 less. And the weird thing about that one was when we contested it, they didn't go directly back to the appraiser. They kept it in-house with their underwriter to review the appraisal and what we were saying to fight it versus what the appraiser had. And I wasn't too happy with the way that they handled that situation. I feel like they didn't handle it officially the way they're supposed to. That could be because they're a hard money lender. They can do that. Maybe they don't have to follow the exact rules. I don't know. If you know, throw it in the comments. But again, I've gone through 3 now where I had a total mix of results. And then there was a 4th contesting that happened, but I did not get to be in control of it. We were the sellers, but for some reason the buying agent actually took the reins, which I should have never let happen. As soon as I knew we were going to contest it, I should have taken over that situation because I'm familiar with it. And I think that I had a newer agent, a rookie agent, and the way she typed up the contesting form where you provide comparables and you give a little description, she was basically attacking the appraiser, you know, saying things that I would never say to an appraiser, because there should be no bad blood. You don't need to be saying that, like, what are they thinking about? Why would they not even consider this comparable? They're crazy. Some of the things that were written in the contesting form, if I were the appraiser reviewing it, I would have just shot it down myself as well and not even looked at any of the numbers, just because of how rude they were in saying that I don't know what I'm doing. So there was a 4th experience with it contesting, and obviously the value did not change, but we dropped the price $3,000 just to get this buyer into the property, because it wasn't worth prolonging the closing over that. That's some experiences I've had the past couple years in real estate with appraisals. And again, I hope you guys got some awesome information. If you did, hit that subscribe button, smash that like button so I can keep bringing you some great information at no cost to you. Now we are gonna move on. We're gonna talk about some marketing. We've got to hit up some other properties. More to come. Marketing, marketing, marketing. Something I know well. Something I went to college for. But we're in a whole new ball game now, people. We're in the real estate marketing game. And what's that behind me? Well, that's marketing. Those are marketing signs. Are they the best signs? Maybe, maybe not, but they're signs. Because signage is important. Having good contact numbers is important. And having more than one number is also important. And I say that because depending if you're an investor, if you're a real estate agent, you're gonna build up a network of a lot of people, and it should be a long play. Not many people get into real estate and think, oh, I'm gonna do this for a year or two. They think I'm gonna do this forever, especially when you start seeing the paychecks and you see the freedom that real estate can create for you and the happiness you bring to other people, such as the buyers when they get to move into that first house or their dream house, whatever it is. So being able to provide that service to people is awesome. And at the same time, you never know when leads are gonna come in. You never know when that old transaction from a year or two ago just gave their neighbor your contact information, or they decided this house just isn't big enough as that family's growing. It's time to move. It's time I pick up the phone and call Dane because he was so great. That's right, he was the Great Dane. Okay, sorry. We're just going on tangents now. But anyways, it's good to just have a phone number that you know you're gonna have for a long time, because again, you don't know when that person's gonna pick up the phone again and maybe call you 2 years later. So one thing to take note of, I think a lot of people watching this are more investors. And one thing I want to say is having a phone number that you're going to have for a long time is important. And the one thing you got to be careful of, and this is a good tip I think, is if you go to companies like a CallRail where you can get a whole bunch of phone numbers. CallRail allows me for at $40 or $50 a month, I can have 10 phone numbers. And with those phone numbers, I can do different things. I can have them go to a call prompt where when you call the number, it's hit 1 to talk to Dane, hit 2 to leave a message, hit 3 to talk to my partner. Different things like that. And that's called an IVR system. So you could have that set up with a phone number. You can have your phone number reply back with a text message. You can have phone numbers go straight to voicemail. You can have phone numbers just give information and then hang up on the person. Or you can have numbers that forward to other numbers. And that's something that's important. Make sure when you're giving out a number or you're throwing marketing material out there, whether that's on postcards, websites, whatever it is, they're always gonna come back to you. You don't want that phone number that you sent a postcard out last year to have some number that you don't even own anymore. So my first marketing tip for you guys is make sure you get signage and make sure you've got the correct contact information, and you're gonna stay the owner of that contact information for as long as possible. And that might mean when things are going slow, when business has slowed down, you might have to still pay the bill for those pieces of, you might have to still be paying for some of those services, such as that CallRail where you have all those numbers. You might need to pay for that service for the next 20 years. You just don't know. So it's important. It's important to make sure you keep those numbers. And I personally, I think Google Voice numbers are awesome. Some people advise against it because you never know what Google's gonna do. Obviously, Google's not a small company. And if they ever did change something with that system of theirs that allows you to have a phone number, I guarantee you they're gonna allow you to port that number or put that phone number with another carrier. So I shouldn't have to worry about losing that number. But I do have my Google Voice number, which is, we'll call it my main investor number, my main real estate phone number. And then I've got my personal cell that when I started out, I was really using that for a lot more of the actual realtor, real estate agent transactions. I have since been transitioning to getting everybody really on that Google Voice number of mine. And it's also, I like to call it the bat line. I know when that number's ringing, there's a good chance that that's a lead or something positive could be coming out of that phone call, versus my personal cell where I'd rather keep that friends, family, that sort of thing. Now I'm just ranting. But again, tip number 1 for marketing, have good contact information, have a website that works, have phone numbers that work, and route properly, and make sure you're not gonna lose those numbers and you're gonna be giving leads to some random person down the road. All right, I'm gonna think of a new tip for you guys coming up next.